For this lake, Russia is again taking to the streets on Nightingale screens. The Kremlin responds harshly. Interethnic conflicts are starting in Moscow. Labor migrants are fighting and brawling using rebar as improvised shields. In the center of Moscow, migrants staged a rodeo with beatings using bats and shovels. Interethnic and interreligious protests are beginning in Moscow and the Moscow region. The Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs has opened a criminal case for hooliganism after a mass brawl in New Moscow and promised to deport all foreign participants from the country. In Saint Petersburg, musicians were detained during a stop-time performance. Concerts have become a symbol of protest against Putin and the Kremlin regime. There are mass protests in Yekaterinburg. Zhenya Radost was arrested there. 14 days for songs and courage. There are protests again in Perm. A solidarity concert with noise MC and pornofilmy. Police in the crowd. Every chord is now an act of defiance. The situation in Moscow is even harsher. Mass raids are taking place across the city. Men of conscription age are being grabbed right on the streets and in the metro, put into police vans and taken to draft offices. The facial recognition system is being used as a trap between Moscow metro stations. At exits near coffee shops, a Russian soldier can spot you and send you to the front. Young people go out with a guitar instead of performing at a concert venue and end up in a police van with a draft notice. After the events in Saint Petersburg and the large-scale protests there at Kazan Cathedral, the FSB is preparing an operation to arrest everyone protesting against Putin and the Kremlin. A fuel and energy crisis. Prices are rising. Russia is plunging into collapse. The economic sanctions imposed by Trump against Russia are trapping the Russian economy, dragging it down. And this is what sparks the riots. Strangely enough, it's the youth who are rebelling. The Kremlin is frightened by freedom and responds with violence, arrests, blocking messengers right now, and pressure on anyone who sings or simply goes out into the street with anti-war songs, anti-war slogans, slogans against Putin and the Kremlin regime. But the wave has already started. Musicians, students, ordinary people, and this is only the beginning. The regime is trying to silence the streets, but the streets are louder. Friends, please like this video. Today we will talk about the mass protests in Russia, Saint Petersburg, Perm, other regions, Moscow, where people are taking to the streets, singing anti-war songs, gathering at rallies to speak out to the Kremlin. No to Putin. Get lost, Solovyov. Everyone is sick of you.
We don't care how many missiles they're planning to launch. If they destroy our decision-making centers, the hand of death is automatically triggered.
Russia is breathing through the streets again. In St. Petersburg, members of the band Stop Time were detained. Their concerts have become a symbol of protest against the war and the regime. In Yekaterinburg, street musician Zhenya Radostya was arrested. In Moscow, a teenager with the pseudonym B. Degno, who just wanted to play anti-war, anti-Putin songs at Chisty Prudy, was detained. At the concerts, songs by Noise MC and Pornofilmy are played, and the authorities respond with hysteria and arrests. In Perm, the police stand right in the crowd. So far, there have been no arrests, but now every chord there feels like an FSB explosion. And all this is happening against the backdrop of a new wave of raids on conscripts in the Moscow metro and reports of assassination attempts on Putin. The regime is in a panic. It crushes the youth, blocks communication, but the protest is already here. It can't be turned off. Friends, please like this video and leave a few kind words in the comments to support the armed forces of Ukraine. Share your thoughts on the prospects of this youth protest movement that began in St. Petersburg at the Kazan Cathedral, after which mass arrests started. Will Russia awaken the washed-out Russia, the country of slaves, the country of masters? When will it finally rise? This is the question I wanted to ask you in the comments. What do you think these protests against the Kremlin, against the war, and against Putin's regime will lead to? Petersburg as the starting point of the protest. On Nevsky, the musicians Stop Time, who were performing anti-war songs, were detained. They are accused of discrediting the army, and soon after, arrests of street performers began all over the country. Number 2 is Yekaterinburg, the arrest of Zhenya Radost. She was given 14 days, friends, for singing songs by Noisy MC and Monetochka. His concerts were supported by hundreds of students and veterans who were tired of Russian pro-Putin propaganda. Moscow. The detention of 17-year-old musician Bideko. He was planning to play at Chisty Prudy. Instead, he ended up in a police van and was charged with extremism. In Perm, a solidarity concert took place. Band songs were performed. The police watched from the crowd, but so far did not intervene. Of course, one of the main topics is information blockades. WhatsApp and Telegram are being massively blocked in 20 regions right now. Roskomnadzor, the Russian authority, explained that this is to fight criminals. And who are the criminals? Write your thoughts in the comments. Is it the pro-Kremlin Putin regime or someone else? In reality, all of this is an attempt to silence the protest. Even Russian war correspondents are saying that the internet is being massively blocked in Russia, and mobile connections are being jammed to prevent any protest actions. Let's remember the veterans of the so-called special military operation who wanted to lynch Solovyov because he himself doesn't go to the front and allegedly humiliates them. Russian veterans, paratroopers, murderers, and war criminals. In other words, the infighting is starting. The veterans of the special military operation themselves are now turning against Solovyov.
Now there are bloggers who are trying to ban social activity, but they don't exist in Solovyov's world. There was a confrontation recently, Grozny versus Velikursk, where Kadyrov openly spoke out about General Shaman, about a hero of Russia, about a man, a combat officer who went through both Chechen wars. Not a single deputy stood up for him. How can young people look at our government after that? How are they supposed to judge our government? How are they supposed to follow it? When at first they give Sasha awards, and then alright, let me think for a moment. When suddenly the head of one of the republics can just let him go, say that he's an enemy, a killer, and a maniac. So, you are making a process here. Now they're banning music, banning vloggers. Yes, maybe some of them really should be banned. But the censorship is working in the wrong direction. When Solovyov sits there shouting about how Poznikov, Alex Parker, and other war correspondents are bastards, while he himself sides with whoever is more convenient for him. When his own son is a representative of the LGBT community, which is banned in the Russian Federation, and yet he sits there yelling that all of us here in Siberia are complete bastards, who are we supposed to follow? Where are we supposed to go? I talk to ex-convicts, athletes. Every week I play for the recognition of school children and young people, at least 3 times a week. And among young people now, there's this saying, we love our motherland, but we don't really care for our government at the moment. Here,
first of all, I'd like to say that you're right about Solovyov. Why is it that this person, I've stopped watching his program several years ago, why does he still continue to broadcast on the country's main channel? Yes, they gather people there in different ways. We can take the category of foreign agent. Honestly, I don't even understand whom he's labeling as a foreign agent these days. To tell the truth, for example, there's the remarkable and influential leader of the band DDT, Yuri Shevchuk, and he's considered a foreign agent here. And this is a person who, during the first Chechen campaign, performed for our troops. But I'm not talking about everyone, just about world-class stars.
And of course, another very important topic is the raids and mobilization. It's really important to talk about this because forced mobilization has already reached Moscow. In Moscow, there are mass detentions of men at metro stations. People with illnesses, those who have been deregistered, are being forcibly sent to military enlistment offices. The metro has become dangerous for anyone who doesn't want to be cannon fodder, but will end up being so anyway. Russian opposition human rights activists report that there are raids in Moscow. Men of conscription age are being detained in handcuffs and sent to the assembly point on Ugreshskaya, according to human rights activists. Using facial recognition systems, conscripts are being caught between Novokuznetskaya and Tretyakovskaya, at Kievskaya, Volzhskaya metro stations, at Barikadnaya, at Timiryazevskaya, all across the capital city of Mordor. Even those who are unfit for service due to health reasons or have been removed from the register to move elsewhere are being forcibly sent to the assembly point. And at Ugreshskaya, people are being sent to the army as quickly as possible. Forced mobilization is in full swing. If before it was happening in Siberia, beyond the Urals, and in other republics, today it has reached Moscow. The Moscow metro has truly become dangerous. If any of the racists are at risk of being drafted, they should avoid going underground so as not to become cannon fodder for Putin. Friends, write in the comments what you think. Why is this already happening in Moscow? How serious are Putin's problems with mobilization? And which is very important, why have payments to all the war criminals going to fight against Ukraine suddenly been drastically reduced? In other words, at this point, Putin simply has no money to wage war because the economy is falling apart at the seams. And all of this is primarily connected to the energy crisis because Ukraine has attacked oil refineries, almost all the refineries in the European part of Russia. $100 billion in losses for the Russian energy system is just the beginning. Most importantly, 85% of Russia's regions are now suffering from a fuel and energy crisis. There's no gasoline, but hang in there, to paraphrase the words of the alcoholic Medvedev. Of course, let's also remember that for the first time, Russia is importing petroleum products from Belarus and China. This is just shocking content at this moment. And after the sanctions on Rusneft and Lukoil, which the United States officially imposed on Russia this week under Trump. Serious statements because the Russian economy is heading toward the abyss. Apparently, Putin can no longer spend so much money on the war against Ukraine. And then all these killers will return and riots will begin. Riots against Russia. That's what we're waiting for. After all, it's not for nothing that Putin said the response would be terrifying.
Regarding escalation, but if such weapons are used to strike Russian territory, the response will be very serious, if not overwhelming. Let them take a moment to really think about that. Everything is absolutely fine. Of course, this is an attempt to put pressure on Russia, but no self-respecting country and no self-respecting people ever make decisions under pressure, because doing so would compromise their principles and undermine their sense of sovereignty. It is important for any nation to act freely and independently, without being forced or influenced by outside forces. And, without a doubt, Russia has that privilege. After all,
it's not for nothing that his eye was twitching and he came out with a statement, because even though he puts on a brave face and claims that the 19th package of European Union sanctions and Trump's sanctions mean nothing for the Russian economy, in reality, what proves the opposite is that Putin's right-hand man, Kirill Dmitriev, a former resident of Kyiv, a traitor and a collaborator, urgently flew to the United States and met in Miami with another pro-Russian lackey, Witkov. Two fixers trying to work something out. This only shows that Russia's war economy is falling apart at the seams today. There is panic at the top amid protests, rumors of an assassination attempt on Putin, and a breakdown of discipline in the army. According to sources, the dictator himself is afraid to leave the country. As you may recall, in the past few days, there has been a surge of information claiming that supposedly British intelligence is preparing an assassination attempt on Putin. This information was leaked by Russian propagandists themselves, saying that if Putin flies over Poland, he will be arrested. His plane will be forced to land, and the Poles will arrest Putin, of course. And that's why, most likely, under no circumstances will Putin fly to Budapest, Hungary, because he is simply afraid of an assassination attempt and fears for his life. Meanwhile, Russia is boiling over. Solovyov, in a fit of hysteria, claims he's not afraid of tomahawks, but in reality, both he and Putin, as well as Trump, are. Just look at their frightening, intimidating statements.
And if he really does give the tomahawks, honestly, I can't quite imagine how that's going to play out. Yes, that would bring us closer to what is called nuclear war. Well,
that's good, isn't it? But we'll go straight to heaven, and they'll just die like dogs.
Well, we could just try to struggle a little bit longer.
For those who want to suffer.
You can
suffer if you want. We don't care how many missiles they're planning to send. If they destroy our decision-making centers, the dead hand system is automatically activated.
Yes, the perimeter system. Why am I saying this? It's clear that Russia will resist. It's clear that we need to create a completely different kind of response here. But even the launch of a single tomahawk on our territory will allow them to better determine and understand our reaction to certain actions, more particularly in specific situations.
Dmitry Anatolievich made it clear. This would be the start of a nuclear war, and accordingly, we would have to strike first at the storage sites and deployment locations of the nuclear delivery systems, as well as at the decision-making center, so we don't have to get up twice, turning the strait into Comrade Stalin Strait, and at the same time, wash away that incomprehensible little British spit to hell.
By the way, returning to Britain and our response, the President hinted quite unambiguously that we are moving on to testing those ideas we've talked about, and most likely this refers to the final stage of Poseidon. And for the British, this is more complicated, or the Burevestnik missile, meaning something strategic.
To test it at the proper testing ground? Last time there was a very good testing ground, Yuzmash, right? They tested Oreshnik at Yuzmash. That was a very correct decision. Here you could use the British Isles if we're talking about Sidor. Just to make it clear, modern warfare isn't about one line charging at another. So for these guys to move forward faster, maybe we should help them? And then the Westerners won't say, look, the Russians are launching another offensive. Look at their territorial ambitions. And just like that, everything is simple. And then maybe, if we, for example, enter the ruins of Kyiv, maybe there will be no one left to give the order to strike our oil refineries deep inside our territory. Maybe that would change things somehow. Or for example, what if Kyiv is still there, but Odessa and Mykolaiv are gone? We have all the blueprints, we'll rebuild. Just a few
Strikes on Kyiv, if they occur, will likely result in a mass exodus of people, just like what happened in the year 2022.
Russia is boiling over. First the musicians, tomorrow the whole street. The streets of Saint Petersburg, the streets of Moscow and Perm are becoming stages of freedom, while the Kremlin is turning into the country's main prison. The regime is coming apart at the seams. Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel Dash. Also, let me know in the comments what you expect from Trump's sanctions and the 19th package from the European Union, about the fight against the Shadow Fleet, the detention of Russian warships in the North Sea, Dmitriev's visit to Miami, and of course about the mass protests and musicians who took to the streets, as well as the raids in Moscow. Stay with us. Stay on the bright side. Thank you for being with us. Ukraine will definitely win. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.